Before anything else, drop a like right now, because it helps the video reach even more supporters. And if you're not subscribed yet, subscribe this moment so you don't miss any important updates about Manchester City. Turn on the bell and come be part of this community that lives the club every single day, match by match, behind the scenes by behind the scenes. Now then, Manchester City supporter, take a deep breath because the last few hours have been intense, full of movement, internal decisions, and news that could change the course of the season. The club is living one of those moments where everything happens at once. A key player returning, doubts around the future of important names in the squad, and even internal discussions about the head coach for the coming years. Manchester City received news that completely changes the defensive outlook at this decisive point of the season. Ruben Dias is back training with the group, and that alone already shifts the mood at the training ground. This isn't just another player becoming available, but a leader, a technical and emotional reference inside the squad. His absence had been felt not only in defensive organization, but also in the way the team reacted in moments of pressure. City have come through weeks that were extremely demanding, with a heavy run of matches, travel, tight decisions, and obvious physical wear. The away draw against Tottenham made it clear the squad was being pushed to the limit. Even after taking the lead, the team couldn't sustain the pace to the end, something that isn't common when City are at full strength and brimming with confidence. The situation became even more delicate when, on top of Ruben Dias, Pep Guardiola also became unavailable. Losing two defenders of that level at the same time forced Pep Guardiola to reshape the team's structure dramatically. Tactical tweaks, positional changes, and trusting names that weren't universally backed up to that point became necessary to keep the side competitive. It has to be said that, even with those difficulties, Manchester City managed to adapt. Abdulkadir Kusanov took his chance and showed personality, while Marc Guehi settled in quickly since arriving, bringing security, game reading, and consistency. The partnership they formed produced positive answers, got through big matches, and restored a minimum level of stability to the defensive line. Those performances created something Pep Guardiola knows well and even appreciates, a genuine dilemma when it comes to picking the team. When the options work, the manager gains room to manage the squad strategically, thinking not only about the next match, but the whole block of fixtures to come. Even so, Ruben Dias returning represents a different level. His presence at the training ground already changes the dynamic of the drills, the demands, and the communication on the pitch. He's the kind of player who organizes the backline with gestures, positioning, and anticipation, something you don't learn overnight. The timing of this return is considered almost perfect internally. Manchester City now enter a decisive run, with clashes that can define the season's direction on multiple fronts. First, the home tie against Newcastle in the second leg of the Carabao Cup semi-final. The 2-0 advantage offers some comfort, but nobody inside the club is treating it as done. Straight after that comes one of the toughest tests on the calendar, Liverpool at Anfield in the Premier League. A direct showdown, in a historically hostile ground, knowing the gap to Arsenal at the top of the table is 6 points. Any mistake can be costly in a title race that's getting tighter and tighter. Ruben Dias has already been seen training normally at the City Football Academy, which has really lifted the supporters. It doesn't mean, however, that he'll be thrown straight back in as a starter. The recent injury history means the medical staff and coaching staff are handling the return with caution, prioritizing the player's long-term physical condition. The big internal debate revolves around how to manage this comeback. Pep Guardiola may choose to ease him in, giving controlled minutes, maybe starting on the bench and coming on during games. On the other hand, there's the argument that Dias's leadership and experience are exactly what the team needs right now under maximum pressure. Keeping the Kusanov and Guehi duo, which has been working, is also a real possibility. That would allow Ruben Dias to rebuild rhythm without immediate overload, while City maintain a defensive structure that has already shown efficiency in recent weeks. Whatever the choice, the simple fact of having Ruben Dias available again significantly expands the squad's options. In a season where every detail matters, Having depth and quality in key positions can be the deciding factor between lifting trophies or ending the year with a feeling of frustration. And while the defense gains a heavyweight boost, another name in the squad is living a moment of reflection and affirmation inside the club. Matias Nunes recently reached the mark of 100 games in a Manchester City shirt, a symbolic number that represents not just longevity, but adaptation and growth inside one of the most demanding systems in world football. That milestone arrives at a special moment in his career. At 27, Matias Nunes is having his most consistent season under Pep Guardiola. What stands out is the transformation of his role within the team. Developed as a central midfielder, he's gone through a deep adaptation process and is now the team's main option at right back. That shift wasn't simple. It demands tactical understanding, physical endurance, defensive awareness, and positional discipline, qualities that aren't always natural for a midfielder. And yet Nunes embraced the challenge and responded with solid, consistent displays that have looked more confident every week. When he joined City from Wolverhampton for a significant fee, there was immediate expectation, but also patience. Pep Guardiola's system is famous for requiring time to adapt, and Nunes was no exception. In his first months, he mixed good spells with difficulties, gradually learning the details of the model. Many supporters remember Matias Nunes' first major impact back at Sporting, when he faced Manchester City in the Champions League. At that time, he caught attention for intensity, ball carrying, and physical presence in midfield. That performance was one of the factors that put his name firmly on the English club's radar. At City, he was part of a trophy-winning season, contributing in an important way and building good attacking connections, especially with Phil Foden and Erling Haaland. But as time went on, the squad changed, tactical needs shifted, and Nunes' role also had to evolve. Over the last 2 seasons, he stopped being just a box-arriving midfielder and became a fundamental piece in the defensive structure on the right side. A job that often goes unnoticed, but is essential for the team's balance. Closing spaces, holding the line, offering an outlet, and, when possible, supporting the attack. City remain alive in multiple competitions even after a few recent stumbles. The away draw against Tottenham was a hard blow, mainly because of how it happened, letting a lead slip. Nunes, in fact, missed some important matches through illness, such as the defeats to Manchester United and Bodo Glimt, but that didn't reduce his importance in the season's planning. With close to 30 appearances across all competitions, he's established himself as a trusted name for the coaching staff. His consistency has directly affected other players in the squad, like Rico Lewis, who has had less space thanks to the Portuguese player's strong performances. Speaking about the 100 games milestone, Nunes showed pride and identification with the club. He highlighted the pleasure of wearing the shirt, the internal environment, and the quality of the group of players and staff. He made it clear he feels at home and would like to keep building an even bigger story at the Etihad. His performances have been so convincing that they've practically ended the debate about needing to sign a new right back. Even with January market speculation, what happened on the pitch spoke louder. On top of that, Nunes has pushed his way back into conversations about the Portugal national team, with a real chance of starting at the next World Cup. Meanwhile, Manchester City have also been active in the market, bringing in names like Antoine Semenyo and Marc Guéhi, while letting players such as Oscar Bob and Stefan Ortega leave. Decisions that show a club attentive to squad balance, both in the present and the future. And it's precisely with the future in mind that perhaps the most sensitive discussion of all appears: the head coach. Despite Pep Guardiola remaining firmly in the job, internally, Manchester City don't ignore alternative scenarios. Behind-the-scenes conversations suggest the club is already mapping possible names in case of a potential departure at the end of the season. One of the names circulating most strongly is Xabi Alonso. The Spanish coach appears as part of a short list of options considered viable if Guardiola's cycle comes to an end. Even with the current manager downplaying rumors, the fact is his contract has less than 18 months left, and the natural wear of so many years in charge also enters the equation. Guardiola has faced this kind of speculation before and has always been direct in shutting down gossip. Even so, recent league results, with only one win in the last 6 matches, have increased external pressure and fueled discussions the club would rather handle discreetly. Beyond Xabi Alonso, other names are mentioned in internal circles, such as Enzo Maresca and Cesc Fabregas, who have been standing out in their current work. Vincent Kompany, despite the emotional connection to the club, isn't seen as an immediate option, and Roberto De Zerbi also doesn't appear as a priority right now. For now, Pep Guardiola remains the man in charge, focused on the next challenges and chasing more trophies. But the simple fact the club is discussing contingency plans shows the level of professionalism and long-term planning that has defined Manchester City in recent years. And when you look at all of this happening at the same time, it becomes clear that Manchester City are living one of those periods of quiet transition where decisions taken now will echo for many months, maybe years. It's not only about winning the next match or lifting the next trophy, but about maintaining a winning structure even when pieces change, when fatigue appears, and when the landscape around becomes more competitive. The possible discussion about Pep Guardiola's future doesn't come out of nowhere. It's born precisely from this moment where the club has to think beyond the immediate. The manager built an era at the Etihad based on control, territorial dominance, constant pressure, and an identity so strong it turned City into a global reference. Replacing that isn't simple, isn't quick, and can't be treated like something improvised. That's why, while Guardiola keeps working normally, the directors evaluate profiles that can keep that essence, but also offer new solutions. Xabi Alonso appears in this context not only because of the name or his past as a player, but because of how his teams compete, his modern reading of the game, and his ability to manage groups that are still growing. City watch, analyze, and wait, without rushing, but without closing their eyes to any possibility. At the same time, inside the dressing room, the impact of this kind of talk is always delicate. Experienced players understand football as well as anyone and know cycles begin and end. Young talents, in turn, watch how the club handles these situations to understand whether they're in a stable, ambitious environment prepared for the future. So far, Manchester City have managed to shield the group, keeping focus on matches and the competitions still in progress. That's clear in the attitude of players like Ruben Dias. Even during recovery, he kept a constant presence in the group's day-to-day, guiding, talking, and taking an active role in preparation. His leadership doesn't depend only on playing 90 minutes, but on being a continuous reference, something that shows in the collective confidence. The return to training, therefore, carries enormous symbolic weight. It isn't just another option on the bench, but a sign that City regain part of their defensive identity precisely when the calendar demands maximum concentration. Knockout games, direct clashes, and tight decisions don't forgive disorganization, and it's in that scenario that players like Dias make the difference. The coaching staff know that and are working to fit all the pieces in the best possible way. The idea isn't to break what's working, but to raise the team's overall level. If Kusanov and Guehi have earned their space, that won't be ignored. On the contrary, it creates healthy competition, where everyone has to keep standards high to stay as a starter. That squad depth is something Manchester City have built over the years and is now starting to show its true value. When injuries hit, when fatigue weighs heavy, the team doesn't collapse. It adjusts, changes, adapts, and stays competitive. Not perfect, but resilient. Matias Nunes is a clear example of that constant adaptation. Few players would accept such a major change of position without resistance. He not only accepted it, he improved. He turned a team need into a personal opportunity, expanding his skill set and becoming a more complete athlete. That versatility explains why City trust him even with market speculation. January always brings rumors, offers, and uncertainty, but the club has made clear through actions that they see Nunes as an important piece for the present and the future. At the same time, the player himself showed maturity when speaking about the moment, without feeding gossip, focused on performance and growth. That also connects with the broader squad planning. selective exits, strategic arrivals, and constant care not to inflate the group beyond what's necessary. Every decision directly impacts internal harmony, something Guardiola has always valued. When City brought in names like Semenyo and Guehi, it wasn't just about numbers, but about specific traits that could complement the playing model. In the same way, letting players go who wouldn't have consistent minutes is part of that balance, avoiding internal frustration and keeping the level of competition high. Looking at the Premier League table, the situation demands maximum attention. The gap to Arsenal isn't irreversible, but any new slip can make the mission far more complicated. Away matches, especially at grounds like Anfield, often define seasons. That's where the mental strength of a squad used to deciding titles is measured. The Newcastle tie in the Carabao Cup, despite the advantage built, also demands seriousness. Semi-finals don't allow relaxation, and City know reaching another final is vital to keep the winning rhythm and confidence high. All of this happens while the external debate about the manager's future grows. Questions in press conferences, analysis from former players, speculation in the media. Guardiola, experienced, handles it naturally, but it's still a constant noise. The challenge is turning that pressure into fuel, something he has done many times in his career. Internally, the message to the players is clear: total focus on the now. Decisions about the future will be made at the right time, with calm and strategy. Until then, the objective is to compete on every front and extract the maximum from the squad available. For the supporter, following this moment is living a mix of anxiety and confidence. Anxiety about what could change, confidence because of the club's recent history. Manchester City have shown time and again that they know how to reinvent themselves without losing identity. And the current signs suggest that process is still moving forward. The return of leaders, the consolidation of new names, and the long-term planning form a complex but coherent picture. Nothing is done on impulse. Everything goes through analysis, data, observation, and above all, alignment with the club's philosophy. The next matches will say a lot about how these pieces fit together in practice, whether Ruben Dias quickly returns to a leading role, whether Matias Nunes maintains his level at right back, whether the team responds to the pressure in the table, and whether Guardiola can steer another decisive phase with the authority he's always had. Whatever the immediate results, one thing is certain: Manchester City keep moving, evolving, adjusting, and preparing for what comes next, without fear of facing difficult decisions when they become necessary. And now, I want to hear from you. If this content made sense, if it helped you understand the club's moment better, and if you like following deep analysis like this, drop a like right now, because it makes a huge difference. If you're not subscribed yet, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any important updates about Manchester City. Turn on the bell and stay tuned because the next few weeks promise big emotions.